Casey, thanks for joining us. Do you want to just start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
I grew up in just north of San Francisco in Marin County. I had a pretty standard childhood, grew up in the suburbs. I sort of realized I wanted to be involved in filmmaking in some way when I was like a teenager. There's sort of a common thread for a lot of people in my generation, which is that I started making skate videos with my friends, and I was a little skate rat in middle school. And that kind of was just an easy transition into grabbing a camera, but I wasn't one of those kids who was like born with an AE1 in their hands taking, 35 mil photos like since birth. Like I just sort of liked storytelling. I liked being behind the camera. I liked making the memories with my friends. And, I took an interest in filmmaking from that perspective, but it was more about story and about like seeing things come together more than anything. Like I really loved editing projects and finishing them and just one-man banding a bunch of stuff. And eventually that led me to film school. I did sort of the film school route, which I have a ton of mixed feelings about, but for me it worked and was a good experience. And it was sort of there that I found DPing, which is sort of later in film school for me. Like I think I went there originally wanting to be an editor and taking my first editing class and realizing I hated it and that it was definitely not for me. A bit of an identity crisis, and a couple different trials and tribulations later, I found myself shooting someone's short film and was like, oh, this is the thing that I've liked the whole time. So I kind of fell into it in a way. Like I didn't, there's a lot of cinematographers who are like, I saw Jaws when I was 7 and decided I wanted to be a DP, and I definitely was not that person.
During film school, when you decided I want to be a DP, did you then try and like watch other films or like really dive into like the inspirational side of like where you wanted to go with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sought out the things that inspired me. Like I'm not a cinephile. Like there are some folks who, that eat, sleep, and breathe movies, and they can tell you every single thing shot by every person. I'm just not that person. I never have been. For me, it's been more like an a la carte experience where if I find something that happens to be inspiring to me, I end up delving into it really deeply. So there are a couple, specific things that really caught my eye. Like I became a really big Emmanuel Lubezki fan, which is not, no longer cool to say that. And, this day and age, he's won a million Oscars and it's, a household name for DPs. But I remember falling in love with Simple Fan. I think, his work in the music video space specifically was kind of something I really latched onto. His collaborations with Hiro Murai, which, this is not a niche thread by any means. Like plenty of people have been inspired by Hiro and Larkin, but I just remember there were a few like Childish Gambino videos that really blew me away, and just kind of the amount of creativity that those two were able to inject into their work. And it just kind of opened the door for me of what cinematography could mean in terms of like this duality of being flashy and intricate and stylish, but at the same time, the end goal being story and being a feeling and an emotion. And I think those two things have been the two ends of it that I've always find really compelling. Like there's this ability to kind of tinker with the toys and the tools and create something really special. But then there's also this ability that sometimes good cinematography is like ugly. Like it's just doing the right thing for the moment. And as I've gotten older, that tends to be a bit more of what I gravitate towards. But when I was younger, the things that spoke to me were flash, for sure. For me, like Children of Men is my all-time favorite movie as from a cinematographer's perspective. And that movie is like, the Bible when it comes.
And so in terms of the initial meeting, when you first meet a director, what do you talk about? Like, how do you get to the point of what they're trying to say? Like, do you ask them for reference material? Like if they say, I want it to look a certain way, do you how do you like internalize that?
A two-part conversation, because I think the first thing when I am working with a new director is I want to get to know them as a human being. Like I think that's more important in a way, because you're going to spend a lot of time together, and it's important just to get on, like simply to get to know what they like, what they don't like, what kind of person are they? Do they like to joke a lot? Are they more serious? Like it's just nice to kind of get to know somebody. And that's sort of part of why I ended up not being an editor and why I became a DP is I'm a people person. I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people, and that fills up my cup. So for me, It's a bit of just getting to know them as a human being. And I think relating to each other on an emotional human level creates good work. But the secondary of that is, you know, in terms of specifics, I think it's whatever they want to give me. Like ultimately, there's plenty of directors who come to me with very specific references and specific shot lists and specific ideas. And then there are directors who come to me with nothing. And I am happy to work with either one. Like I do think it's easier when I work with a director who's specific. I think that tends just to give me more of a starting point, which I like. But there is no wrong answer. Like I've had directors tell me the way this shot should look is this song, and they play me a song, or it's this painting, or it's this photographer, or it's this idea, this like theoretical idea. Those things can inform a visual just as well as any, you know, movie reference ever could. And to be honest, I don't use a ton of references. Like I know some DPs who build lookbooks for everything, and I do when it feels right for me. But especially in the short form world where I'm turning between projects a lot, I tend to not make them. Like for every feature, I would definitely build out more of a thing because I think it's helpful to communicate ideas. And that's sort of what I think the point of a lookbook is less to like have something to draw upon and more a way to explain to people who aren't as visually communicative, like, hey, here's what I'm talking about when I say desaturated, or when I say green, when I say this, like this is what I mean. And you can point to something. But I think it's more of a communication tool than it is inspiration for me. Like I don't tend to draw upon references to create. I sort of just do what feels right.
Right. So, well, yeah, when you first have the initial meeting and then the pre-production and you're going through different ideas, and then when you're on set, do you have like a monitor that you can kind of, everyone's looking at and they can kind of talk about, and if things aren't really going as planned, like you're able to kind of just work with whatever feedback you're getting and try and adjust things to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have a sense of what you're after in an image from conversations. Like I don't think I'm not communicating to a director what I'm after. Like I think I just tend to not need references as often to do it, if that makes sense. Like I think you get a lot from verbiage. You get a lot from physically being on a scout and sitting in a room and saying, I feel like the sun's coming through these windows in this sort of feeling, that late afternoon, 5 p.m. summer feeling. Like those things are to me as equally as communicative as showing a reference. But yeah, I mean, on set in the era of digital cinematography, at least we're all looking at the end product to some degree, which is a double-edged sword for sure. There's parts of me that does not love that aspect of modern day filmmaking because it, you know, takes a bit of the artistry away from the cinematographer. But at the same time, my job is to have my taste be fluent enough for the project that I can show anybody what we're creating and they're happy to see it, you know? So I'm not like anti monitors either. They're a tool for us to talk about what we're making. But it is interesting that 20 years ago, the DP essentially would be the only one who knows what it's going to look like, and everyone else would find out when we get the rushes back. But those days are not here anymore.
Yeah, it seemed like the shooting on film was kind of a mystery, walking around with their little gadgets, taking measurements, and then you just had to trust that they know what they're doing. Otherwise, it's like it'd be detrimental to overexpose or underexpose something on a film. It's like you only get it back a few days later or whatever.
Same time, I feel like with all good director DP relationships, and to some extension the client and the agency, like there is a trust of I'm here to serve the image in a proper way, and if we're working well together. I don't really have a ton of jobs where a director comes over to the monitor and isn't happy with what we're creating, because ultimately by the time we're on set, we would have done our homework to be on the same page. So it's very rare for me that it's anything other than taking something good and just improving it. You know, like if you find yourself lighting something and the director coming over and saying, what the hell is this? Like you probably haven't done your prep.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, how long is that prep process? Like, I guess it varies on different jobs, but is there like a go-to list maybe you have already in your head that you kind of, from experience, like you need to know certain things in order to avoid those like confrontations, or like, you know, you say you're going to shoot it handheld and you get there and they don't know what handheld is, and then they're like, why is it shaking? So it's like, what's happening? So that kind of in terms of trying to like negate those risks in terms of having a argument or like a confusion on set.
Well, I'm very prep heavy. And what I mean by that is that I spend a ton of time trying to get to know the director's sensibilities, things that we might be worried about from the client or the agency, things that have been discussed at nauseum, like, hey, they've repeated over and over again how important this shade of orange is, stuff like that can come up early and you can, impart or push back on if you want. But I think it's just important to prepare. Like, I think by preparing a bunch, you're ready to make in the moment choices and to change things. And part of developing as a cinematographer for me has been just efficiency with the prep. Like, I've found that there are certain repeatable motions that I go through on most jobs that I've found ways to streamline. I make pretty detailed lighting overheads for all of the jobs that I work on, pretty much, like, unless I don't have time for them, like, at all. Like, most of the time I'm making pretty detailed overheads because I can communicate to my gaffer and my key grip what I'm looking for. Sometimes I can use them to communicate to the AD for turnarounds and, amount of time that goes into something. But I just like finding ways to communicate the ideas early, because I think then you can get a calm reaction to those ideas versus when you're on set. I think things just get so pressure cooked that the less you have to talk about on set, the better your day is going to be. And then you're more free to be inspirational, to watch a rehearsal and change things. But also, that whole point is specifically in the short form world, because it's completely different in features. Like, everything about making a movie to me is much more reactive and much less pre-planned. I will go through still a ton of prep, but that prep is more so I have something in my back pocket and have something to fall back on, less this is what I want going in. I think you want to be sensitive to an actor and trying to mirror what they're giving you, even if it surprises you.
And then in terms of like camera technology, do you have like a certain camera that you always use, or you try to jump around depending on the project and like the lenses choice, and like how does that decision get made?
Yeah, I'm a pretty firm don't be beholden to one system person. I don't like the philosophy that there is a right tool, like for everything. Like, I just don't think that's true. I think that especially lens choice is mostly an artistic choice, but it's also a functional choice. Like, stops matter, the aberrations matter. Like, does a lens breathe this much? Like, how does it feel at a T4 versus a T5.6? How does it flare? Is there veiling glare? All of those things can be really specific. Like, you can find yourself in specific lighting scenarios where, like, you might have to have a lens that flares in a certain way just to even see the shot the way you want to see it. Like, I just shot this PGA ad where we ended up carrying 3 different versions of a 24 mil because of different flare characteristics. We had certain shots where we really wanted it to glare out, and then we had other ones where we needed a really clean, retentive image that doesn't lose itself when we have a direct light in camera. So there's different circumstances where characteristics matter. And then when it comes to camera, that to me is almost more that it's purely a logistical, ergonomical, and functional choice. Like, I think there is an element of, like, when you're run and gun, certain sensors I think can lend themselves toward getting a pretty image easier. But when you are lighting something and you have control over the set and your production design, most cameras can do the same thing that every other camera can do. And I think more than anything, your choice is about logistics. It's about, am I handheld a lot? How heavy should it be? Am I on a gimbal? How long do we need to roll for? What kind of codec do I want out of the camera? What's post going to be treating this with? There's, does it have the internal NDs? Like, they're just things that I think guide the decision much more than like image choice. And I think most of the time, if you're asking someone, like, does one camera look better than the other? Like, the answer is no. Like, they all look how you make them look. They're all just, the equivalent of paintbrushes is sort of the analogy you hear from DPs all the time. And I think it's really true. They're all just different paintbrushes, and you can paint a million different ways.
Yeah. And so going back to like the personal networking side of it, like you did a few commercials. How were you able to like get to the next commercial and the next one and next? Like, did you find an agent, or did you work with a production company, or how did that whole process work?
Yeah, I mean, my career has been a bit of like a slow expanding growth. Like I don't think I've had any like specific like big breaks along the way. Like I think you could say that there are projects where I did something more notable than something else that I had done, and that had been helpful to me. But ultimately, the way my career has gone is a bit more like a spider web, or a snowball effect, where it's just one connection begets another connection. You know, one project creates another project, and slowly but surely over years and years of doing that, you create enough momentum for yourself where your name carries something. And also, it's funny to me to even be saying that, because I am an infant in this industry, and my career is tiny, and I have a long way to go. But you know, looking back on where I started, like there's definitely been a ton of growth. You know, it starts, for me, it was that first job led to another job at that same director and production company. We were shooting 5K overall budget music videos, which we made look like 10K videos. And then we got an 8K video and made it look like a 25K video. And we got a 25K video and we made it look like 100, you know? And so you just kind of, early on in your career, trying to mask the bad budgets you're working with and just shoot something great despite that. And, you know, I came up in the music video world. So for me, I didn't really shoot any ads for the first few years. Like most of what I was doing was music videos, probably the first 3 or 4 years. And then I got really, really shitty ads to start, like very corporate, very dull, couldn't be less money involved. You know, and I obviously wasn't making a lot of money as a cinematographer early in my career. It was a lot of scratching and clawing and like trying to just shoot anything. Like that was the first goal, was just shoot anything. And as I started developing, I started to curate a little bit more and kind of choose what I was presenting as my work, and to negate other things that I was shooting, you know, and hide them in the down places of the internet and not show them off. And as that curation got stronger, it led to better opportunities. And over time, it went from 90% commercials and 90% music videos, 10% commercials, to the opposite. And you know, that's not like by design or anything. It's just music videos tend to not pay well, and you need to make a living doing this. So commercials are a bit easier to do that in, but I still love music videos as a format. I still do shoot them. I'm a bit more selective with them, but I definitely still shoot them. But yeah, it's just been a slow growth process. And then I started working with Artistry, who represent me currently, about 2 years ago, and they're amazing. I love my agents there. I have, a commercial rep and features rep there, and they're, one, lovely human beings, which makes it easy to work with them. And then two, they have great taste, and we're very aligned in what we want to do with my career. And that's the most important thing, is to be represented by someone who believes in the right parts of your work.
Earlier on, were you ever like doing any of your own selling, like reaching out to directors or like trying to find jobs?
I mean, that's the whole thing. Like it's an unbelievable amount of legwork to create opportunities. I mean, it's 100 to 1. Like if I'm sending out 200 emails to directors I want to work with, I'm probably hearing back from 20 of them, and I'm probably working with 3 of them. Like I think that's a huge piece of advice to anyone who's starting their career out, is like, it's a numbers game, and you have to like really, really try to put your name out there and to be a salesman for yourself, and to understand and calculate your own worth as an artist, and to do that realistically. Like I would always encourage myself to reach out to people who are at my level, a little bit below my level, and a little bit above my level. But I also wasn't reaching out, to Ryan Johnson when I was 23 shooting music videos. Like you have to kind of understand what you can bring to the table and what's a realistic expectation for yourself, and then go from there and sort of calibrate and move that needle as you go along. But yeah, it's a ton of networking and a ton of outreach. And when I say by networking, is like genuine human connection. It's not like phony meet and greets, mixers and stuff like that. It's like genuinely sitting down with someone for coffee and getting to know who they are and what they care about, and trying to find real reasons to connect. Because ultimately you get to a level as a cinematographer where everyone's amazing. Like every single artist that you're competing against for jobs is an incredible DP, and they deserve every job they get. So how do you beat anyone for a job? It just comes down to like fit and feel. and connection and what you bring to the table and what you're, I think trying to find something that separates you as an artist is important. Like for me, what I call upon is my work ethic. I work really hard and I care, and I show up early and I go home late, and I pour my personal self and my soul into what I work on. And that's a big part of it. I think, it's that. And then it's not always that I'm working with friends, but I try to, like, some of my best collaborators are friends of mine, and they become friends through the collaborations. Like, they're not people I was friends with and then started working with. They're people I became friends with because we genuinely love to be around each other while we're creating. And the marriage of a cinematographer and a director or a producer is so intimate. Like, you spend so much time together, especially if you're on like a movie, but even on a 2 or 3 week commercial, like, you are each other's best friends. You are each other's top of the text, like, all day long, every day. So, like, you don't like that person, you're not going to work with them again, like, ever. There's too many good people. So personability and like the way you relate to people is everything in a way. Because like I said, at a certain point, everyone is damn good. And the only reason you're getting a job is because they happen to want to work with you.
Yeah, so expanding upon that idea, like you mentioned in film school or in normal school or at a job, they don't really teach you how to get along with people. They don't teach you how to behave or how to act or how to control your emotions. So that's something that's learnt through doing, I guess, or maybe from having a good upbringing or experiencing.
Or making mistakes. I mean, I certainly have not been free of those. You find out where the edge is when you go too far. If you make an ethical mistake, you should try to never do it again. Like, I think as long as you're like, you're keeping your eye on like the North Star of who you want to be as an artist and as a person, and you focus on those things, you can try to like craft the right person that you want to be, right? Like, for me, I've built a career on being nice, which sounds so simple, but like it goes a long way. Like, being a nice person who's easy to be around and positive and complimentary. Like, and it's not something I was always naturally the best at. Like, I'm a realist by nature as a human being. So to try to remain positive as an artist has been a journey for me. And it's something I've gotten better at as I've gotten older, because like, one of the most important things you can be as a DP is a light for people. And I know it's a fun double entendre there, but like literally, like, what a director wants from you is to be someone that you're their rock, like, unflappable. Anything goes wrong, you're there to handle it with a smile, and it's not a big deal. And that kind of thing for me is like a realist who's calling it like it is and is blunt and honest was not always easy to just kind of stay on the sunny side of things. But it's something I've learned through experience of wanting to, because that's who I want to be. When you're in the face of problems on set, like, it is hard enough to be on set. Like, you need to be positive. Otherwise, you're never going to make it through.
But yeah, like you said, it is a tricky thing, especially if you have strong opinions of how the image should look, but you might not align with somebody else in the department because they're either going on cost or time or something else. Whereas, like you said, to negotiate with a open mind of what do you think rather than this is what you got to do, like, that's a very fine line.
Just be wrong. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I shot a feature film called Mark Mary and some other people with a good friend of mine, Hannah Marks, who directed and wrote it, and she's brilliant. But one of those scenes in that film, I remember I had a really specific idea of what I wanted to do with the scene from a lighting perspective, and we just were short on time on the day, and I just didn't have the time, and so I did what I could to light it as close to the way I wanted it lit. And I didn't quite get there. And I lit it sort of differently. And as we left that scene, I was a bit frustrated because I didn't feel like I delivered on what I wanted to deliver. But Hannah, who's looking at the big picture of the movie, is going, no, I just got an amazing performance. Like, the scene's amazing. It's gonna be great. And sure enough, like, and I wasn't saying she was wrong. I knew she was right about that, but I couldn't get out of my own head about the mistakes I had made in my own department. Right. And cut to 3 months later, I'm watching the end of the movie, and first watch, I go, oh yeah, she was right. The scene works great. Like, it didn't need the things that I was like, yeah, I failed on the thing that I thought was so important, but ultimately it just wasn't that important. Like, Haley, our lead, gave an amazing performance in that scene, and she carries the scene, and what I did really does not matter. And that's the beauty of a great director, is I think, like, Hannah, to her credit, like, is always able to kind of calibrate what matters and what doesn't matter. And she can throw away, you know, like she can manage her time really well and know, like, no, it's more important for me to get a couple more takes out of this scene and add this shot, and then it is for us to light for 20 minutes. And having that trust in a director to kind of give you pushback and boundaries is huge. Like, and when with my best collaborators, sometimes I'll turn to them and say, hey, I wanted to do this with this setup. Like, can I have 10 more minutes? Do you think it's worth it? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, that is worth it. And sometimes they'll say no. And when they say no, even if it's not the answer I was hoping for, you gotta trust them. Like, that's what they're there for. And I would rather live and die with the director's decision and find out together later, you know, rather than be pushy and you know, really stomp my feet about something and create this negative feeling about what we're creating. Like, it's just, that's what I mean about like knocking yourself down a few pegs. Like, you can realize that the cinematographer is just not always that important. Like, and this is, you know, it goes back to like the old idea that like, if a movie has an amazing script and amazing actors, it can look like shit and it's still a good movie. But you cannot have a beautiful looking film with bad acting and bad script, and it's just not, it can't be a good movie. Like, good cinematography can't carry a movie, whereas good acting and good story can.
Yeah, and I think, like, going on that point, like some DPs like Roger Deakins or someone will light the scene for the scene, and like just whatever happens within there, I'm sure he changes it for a few shots here and there, but yeah, like if the guy goes into the darkness, then he's in the dark. Like, don't bring in a light and try and make it look perfect. It's like, that's meant to be dark. Like,
it is right. Like, that's what it is. And I tend to agree with the school of thought of, I don't like to box actors in with too many flags. If I can, I like to light from outside or up above as much as I can. It's not always possible. It depends on the location, but I just don't like to box people in. And I think that's, especially when you talk about features, it's a little bit different in commercials, where curating an image according to a brand and a feeling is a bit more specific and like pre-planned and it's boarded and stuff. But when you talk about like a movie, like if the script says that the actor walks over to the bookshelf, and when you get into rehearsal, the actor goes, I don't go there, I go to the bathroom. Then they go to the bathroom. Like, that's it. And that happened a few times on Mark Mary, where, you know, the script called for one thing, and like Ben, for instance, one of our leads, would say, I don't feel that. Like, you know, there's a scene in a bathroom where he and Haley are having a fight, and he just goes, I wouldn't stay in the bathroom with her. I would walk out of the room. And yeah, we didn't have time for that on our schedule, but he was right. So we all said, yeah. And the AD figured it out and gave us a little more time to light for 2 spaces instead of 1. And it was 100% the right call. So that's what I mean. Like, you have to listen to the actor's instincts and the director's instincts. And sometimes they fly in the face of what a good shot would be. But if it feels right, it is a good shot. Like, that's it. And I fully subscribe to that. I try to light the room first and then clean up the people as needed. Again, depends on what you're doing. Like, if you're shooting like a beauty ad with a pop star, you probably are spending a little more time on the beauty work. But if you're shooting something that's about a feeling and about a story, like, it tends to be that. And I'm usually a subscriber to simplicity. Like, I tend to believe that one light in the right place will replace 3 in the wrong place, and that sometimes the best light in your scene is the one you turn off. Like, those little quips are things that I've found to be really true and often are used. And you know, I often will have 15 lights prepped and ready to go in a scene, but only turn on 3 of them. Like, it just happens, you know?
yeah. So in terms of like time, how much time do you have, for example, for a commercial? It probably varies, but in general, like, how long do you get like the call, and then in terms of the initial meetings and stuff, like the pre-production, how much time do you get to work on ideas before you actually have the day or 2? And like, how many?
Pre-pro, not time on set, you mean?
Yeah, how much time, like, do you get a call like the week before, the month before, like the day before?
It depends. I would say for commercials, it tends to be anywhere between like a week to 3 weeks, you know, sort of like the amount of time I'll hear about a project to when we shoot. But it depends. Like, if it's a out of town job, those tend to be really fast, because you could only do so much ahead of time without seeing the locations in person and, you know, having your feet on the ground. So travel jobs tend to be really fast, where like I'll fly into, Florida on a Monday. We're scouting that afternoon or Tuesday or something, and then we're shooting by Wednesday or Thursday. And it all becomes very compressed, and it helps to already have a rapport with the director. But also it helps to just have instincts. Like sometimes you just have to go with your gut because you don't have time to like consider a lot of things. You have to just kind of go with what feels right. And that's where experience becomes very helpful. But when I'm in town, or if I'm like getting more time, or just, there's different ways to do it. The most I've ever had for a commercial is around a month, where like, and that honestly ends up feeling like too much time. Like you end up having more time, what to do with, and you're sitting there a week out from the shoot going, I haven't talked to the director today. That's weird. Like there's a sweet spot, but I think it kind of depends on the project. Like some projects need a lot of prep and some don't. I just try to do what's right for the project, and I will always take as much time as they'll give me.
Cool. And do you want to just talk a little bit about one of your commercials, the BMW, The Road to Success?
Really fun project. That was with BMW, featuring Victor Cruz, who's a football player, won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants. So he's sort of a New York themed commercial, which is funny because you definitely don't shoot a lot of car ads in and around Manhattan for many obvious reasons. And we had some fun with some of those choices. But I had Brian Peters directed that, who's a buddy of mine and great director. And I think it all starts with him. First of all, like, he had a lot of ideas when I first came on about how he wanted things to be. Like, he already knew that he wanted kind of an early morning feeling. Like for that first scene you're talking about, he wanted the feeling of like a pre-dawn workout where the lights in the gym are fluorescent and they pop on. And, so a lot of that I came into, and Brian had already kind of laid the foundation of, hey, here's what I'm after. Like he's pretty visually sensitive. And so that's where I was saying, where I love that when a director already has kind of a groundwork and I can either push back on it or add to it or something. But for he and I, it was a pretty fluid collaboration. So knowing all that, like that lighting setup's pretty simple. We shot at night, so we could have control over the windows, which was, that's right up there as an example of like the negotiation you're talking about. When we were originally supposed to shoot, like that was supposed to be a daytime scene. And I had to basically just be like, hey, only way to shoot this the way that Brian's talked about it is to shoot this at night. Like just non-negotiably, this is how we do it. That being said, if they had said we can't do that, I just would have said we can't do this lighting. Like, we can't. I'd rather do something well than do something that flies in the face of what's in front of us, especially on a job that doesn't have all the money in the world, because that job didn't have all the money in the world. They almost never do these days. So you have to be crafty. But shot at night and placed a few tungsten Fresnels outside. I want to say it was a few 5Ks. Like we didn't have the biggest budget on this, so I would have loved bigger lights a little further back, some scissor lifts and stuff like that. But I think these were just top of the Mambo combo stands, 5Ks. We gelled them all with some, I want to say like sodium vapor gel. Omar Nazar was my gaffer on that job, did a great job and really went the extra mile. He and my key grips guy named Jared Herman, they're both awesome. So yeah, we did that, and then all the tubes in the ceiling we had put in. So those weren't there. Those are all run-of-the-mill Astera Titans, but just so that we could have the control over the lighting cue in an easy way. I think they just magneted them to, I think there was some like steel or whatever I-beams up there. So took them a little while with a scissor lift to run around and put them all up there. But that's, the way I prefer to light, like through the windows, through the environmental lighting, practical lighting, just trying to instill things. So pretty simple. And I think for his close up, we also had a walking light. I want to say like a gem ball on a pole or something with a little bit of black wrap to keep it off the wall, just to kind of fill in the eyes and give him something that helped him out a little bit as he's walking. He's celebrity talent, so I always want him to look good. But yeah, that seems pretty simple.
So how long would you have to film like that entire commercial?
That job was a 3-day shoot. So we didn't have, we had a decent amount of time. I would say that I've had worse, but part of what makes that trickier is that you're shooting in New York City. So we had, multiple company moves every day, and those can be long with traveling from Manhattan to Brooklyn and stuff like that. And then, on top of that, we're shooting process trailer work, in the city, in Manhattan, which is not easy, and definitely something I learned a lot from. But like I said, to the credit of Brian, our director, and to everyone on our crew, like, I think we did a pretty good job with it. Like, we found ways to maximize what time we had. And Brian made really smart decisions about what he could pull off in the time we had, and trying to be stylish and accomplish the agency's goals and all of that, which is just not easy, like, especially under the constraints of Manhattan shooting. So, it was great. I was really proud of that project.
Cool. And then there's another one on your website called Jeep Azurist. I think it's pronounced Azurist, and it's like 2 minutes long. I guess it's the director's cut.
Boma Aluma, who directed that piece, and I can't speak enough volumes about how wonderful Boma is. He is an amazing, amazing director who's very story-centric and spends so much time getting to know the people he's photographing. And in this case, these were real people. Like, none of these folks are actors. This is basically telling the story of this family that has lived in Sag Harbor, and had this house for generations. And it's a really cool piece because it's so intimate, because it really explores them as human beings in a really honest way, and their family. And that's all Boma. That's Boma doing his homework and putting in the work to get to know them well and to find the things about them that make them special. And so that film was really cool in that we were given a lot of trust from Jeep and from the New Yorker who funded the project. We were given the agency, like, that's what I'm saying. Even though I just spent 20 minutes talking about, how much sometimes we diverge from an agency, sometimes the agency is unbelievably kind and gives you so much leeway to shoot the way you want. And I've had tons of those projects too. So this was one for sure where they gave us a lot of freedom. We got to explore a lot of things that we wanted to explore. We shot for 2 days in the Hamptons with a really small crew. I think I had one light on that job, like a single light mat. And most of that job was about scouting and picking smart sun direction and time of day and being really intricate with our shooting schedule, and just putting ourselves in the best position to photograph nicely. And what made that successful is that Boma has a deep care for the photography. So if the director doesn't care about that, you just can't do that with limited tools. But because Boma, in the way he tells stories, wants to have a certain tone, and he, again, very visually in tune with what he wants. Like, a lot of the colors we used, a lot of the lighting motivations were stuff he and I discussed at length. So his commitment to that is why it looks really good. And like that dinner table scene, for instance, like, we both talked about, like, we should shoot that, at blue hour, magic hour, as the sun's fading, but still have a presence of warmth, because we didn't want it to feel like this cold, dark, moody thing. You wanted to feel like this sense of, like, family emanating from the dinner table and what family dinner means to these people. So, a big part of that was creating that center of warmth around them. So we, put a light mat over the top, diffused it, a little pillow, let that kind of fall off. And it just really created that family dynamic that we got. And, same thing as Boma. Like, when I shot there for a few days, I got to know this family, better than I would on most commercials. And they were just beautiful people. So it was about, for me, also, like, doing right by them and trying to show off them as a family.
So in terms of, like, planning like a shoot like that, especially with, like, available light or sunlight, do you have, like, any, like, apps like Sunseeker or something like that, so you know exactly where the sun's going to be at what time?
I use all the standard tools. I think Sunseeker is kind of a bread and butter for every DP. I mean, basically on any scout I go on, I stand where we're going to be and screenshot the whole thing. I like to do that so I can refer back to it, because undoubtedly you'll need to refer back to it when you're making your schedules or we're revisiting, where will it be at this exact time? So, like, for instance, there's a shot that's gotten a lot of love from that project, which is one where these two kids are sitting in the bedroom and the sun is kind of like streaming in behind them and kind of highlighting them. And that scene was completely natural light. But when you say natural light, people think low effort. Like, no, it was a ton of effort. I scheduled that there's like a 15-minute window where the sun was going to be in the right spot to come through at that beam angle, and then we strategically kind of blocked the kids so that it was acting as a hair light for one, and then it was bouncing off of like the bed and the floor to give them some love. And so we didn't even use, like, I mean, I only had one light even if I wanted to use it, but we didn't use a single light in that scene. It was just schedule it at the right time of day and use blocking to your advantage, which on that job was the entire job. Like I said, we had one light map. I used it twice. You know, like, it's just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and I've seen some people will use like an Insta 360 and map the whole room, and then they know where to put lights and stuff. But I guess that's if you have like a feature film or something, more time to kind of plot the whole area.
It depends on how you want to, like, you know, do stuff. There's just, like I said, there's a million ways to do it. And I just don't think that's a wrong answer. If someone wants to do LiDAR scans and use that to revisit stuff, more power to them. If I've also written out lighting plans on a cocktail napkin at a hotel because I didn't have time to, like, you know, and I took in a photo of that and sent it to my gaffer and said, do this. Like, there's just, it's all about, I think, time management and knowing what's important and what you should spend your time on, especially on a travel job where you probably have a day or two of prep at most, and you need to kind of say, am I really in tune with the director already and I can spend more time working on lighting, or do I need to spend this time getting to know the director? Because that's most of that Jeep job. Most of the time I spent was with scouting with BOMA and getting in touch with the locations together. And in going through the locations together, we found what we thought would be important, and we were very much on the same page about where we wanted to point the camera, what the feeling should be. And like I said, I think the success, more often than not, especially as you get deeper into your career, the success of a project is purely the success of the director. Like, if a project is well directed, it tends to be well shot. And if a project tends to be poorly directed, it's harder for me to shoot it well.
So there's another one on your website called Mercedes-Benz, the Oscars moving forward. And there's a lot of like nighttime driving shots, and that says you shot that on the Sony Venice. Was that because it performs well at nighttime, like low lights?
Yeah, you're right on. Basically, that was another very tricky budget where Daniel Malachiar, who directed that, and I were trying to really elevate what wasn't a ton of money for this project. And we were shooting at night in downtown Los Angeles, with no condors or big movie lights to help light cars the way that you might. And not only that, but we requested a silver car from the client and ended up getting a jet black one. So that didn't exactly help our cause. But yeah, we knew we would basically have no lighting. And I think all of the shots at night there are completely natural light. So the reason what they are scouting. There are a ton of intricate scouting, and that Daniel and I went around downtown Los Angeles trying to find sections of available light that gave us the right kind of highlight reflections in the body of the car that we were looking for, and then or had enough interest in the background. You know, I think most of them we were able to kind of achieve that. And then yeah, we shot with the Sony Venice purely for the sensor native ISO at 2000 ASA. And if we had a Venice 2 at that time, I would have shot with the Venice 2 for 3200 or whatever it is. So we were kind of just going with the best performing low light camera at the time that we could get our hands on, or at least that I felt was the right choice at the time. And then we shot with, I don't remember what lenses exactly, but we definitely shot with fast lenses, and we're, you know, close to wide open, if not wide open the whole time. I want to say it was maybe like Leicas that we shot that on.
It says some Sumi Luxi.
Luxi. So yeah, some Leica, some Luxis, which are pretty fast. I think they're like a T14 or a 2 or something like that. So we were probably pretty close to wide open. Shout out to our focus puller for dealing with that. And yeah, it was just about having it not feel like a low budget car ad, despite us being a low budget car ad. That's all those choices are geared toward, with me and Daniel wanting it to not suffer image wise just because we didn't have the tools that we should have. And that's a tough battle. It doesn't always work.
Was it like a car sponsor for the Oscars and they just wanted a video to play, or how did that?
televised ad, but for whatever reason, I don't know why the rhyme or reason for why we get the budgets we get, but it was just not, the normal bells and whistles you'd have for a car ad.
And they're cutting back. But in terms of like the drone shot, how did you get that? Was that a...
Yeah, that's an FPV pilot. And I thought that was just pretty rad work by them. Like, to be honest, that's just an incredibly hard shot and something we did not have much time for. I think we had like an hour at most to get that shot. And they do basically like a building dive where he's flying up, 400 feet in the air and then just letting it drop as fast as he can, going through the hole on Upper Grand into Lower Grand and then meeting the car. And I want to say the take they used was maybe our second take. I think we probably did like 8 takes, and I think the second one was that one. And so they, kudos to them, because I basically just sit there and give a thumbs up when we're shooting FPV. I'll pick the camera settings and I'll, impart thoughts about how the motion should be. But when it comes to the execution, I have no part of that. I just kind of react to what they do on take one and give notes and try to hone the photography. But that's a tough shot to nail. We were basically sitting there on a walkie, timing the car starting with when the drop happens and giving it our best go on take one and shaping it from there.
And what kind of camera would they have mounted on the FPV for that?
A good one. It's a GoPro Hero 8, I want to say. And if I had more money on that job, it might have been more like a Komodo or something like that. But ultimately, I think my perspective on drone has always been that, like, if the shot is unachievable any other way, the audience can kind of make that leap and sort of forget the fact that it's a lower quality shot because of the uniqueness of the perspective, which I think is why that shot works there. Is that, I think our colorist Brian Smaller on that job did a really good job of like marrying the formats and making it work. But ultimately, like, that shot just comes down to it's such a unique perspective that I think you get away with it.
Yeah, like it must have had some good light in that tunnel area, and like you said, the colorist. Yeah.
Some available light, which is sort of what's lighting up the car, but it definitely was pushing the boundaries of low light capability up above. I want to say we shot it at 400 ASA because I didn't want to take it any noisier than that. But it's a GoPro. But if it's a bit different shooting available light at 400 than 2000. I'll say about shooting auto work that at least is my perspective on it, and might be slightly different, is I think it's a very interesting space because it's probably the most established Bible in all of commercial work as to what it's supposed to look like. Like, it's one of the only areas where there really is like an established rule set. Like, you shoot the car at this height, it should be on this lens, the reflection should be this way. Like, there are a lot of like kind of specifics that I don't exactly know how you learn. You kind of learn on a case-by-case basis and have to do a lot of homework. But I remember when I first started shooting car ads, I was really nervous about that because I knew, like, hey, there is a wrong answer here. And it's nerve-wracking in art when there's a defined wrong answer. So a part of getting into the car world for me was just kind of paying homage to those who have come before me and asking the right questions of mentors and friends who do shoot more cars than I do. But at the same time, my perspective on them is that they're still story ads, and that a car commercial is boring to me if it doesn't have a story to tell. So I think some of the most successful ones, like, yeah, you have flashy car moves and you show off the product, and that's ultimately what you're there to do. But the success of a car ad to me is kind of relies on everything but the car.
Yeah, it seems like the manufacturers have like a heights and angles document that they always like submit, but they want the car to look a certain angle, and like they don't want it to be like twisted or whatever. But it's like,
I don't know that I always subscribe to it. Like, I do when it matters, and I don't when I don't. And maybe that'll be a detriment to me in the long run. I don't know. But for me, like, I'm always been a believer that once you know all the rules, you start to break them. And that's where interesting choices come in art, is deciding when it's appropriate to break a rule. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are things I've done on all of my car ads that go against the grain of what someone who shoots them and only them would say to do. But, you pick your spots. Like, there's things that I would always do that every car DP would definitely do. And then there's things where I would say that's not important to me. And I'll find out once I shoot it if I was right. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, you know.
But yeah, that's what I like about the automotive commercial world is, you do have like the one shot of the car driving away or whatever from the angle that they always want, but between then and the end, like there's 1,000 different things you could do. Like they don't always have to be the same thing.
Well, and that's what makes it, and that's what makes a car ad stand out, right? Because ultimately, if everything is very similar in how you shoot cars, like there's always a couple a year that like truly do something remarkable. Like I remember when FPVs first happened, like people used them to shoot cars in ways we hadn't seen before, and that was like, oh, cool, this is a game changer. But for the most part, car shots are car shots. Like they're always the same thing, and what sets them apart is not them. It's the story you're telling around the car. And that to me is the more, and that's maybe just my perspective as a DP. I'm more human focused. I'm more naturalistic. I tend to like things that are about story and about being grounded. And as this point in my career, I'm less concerned with flash, which isn't always the point of automotive cinematography. Sometimes it is about flash.
Yeah, I think the good car commercials are the ones that kind of give you that experience of driving the car, or like the feeling of it. Like that's why a lot of them are like road trip, like they go off and do a road trip, or escapism.
Ones that show off the story of a brand, that, oh, BMW has been here for X amount of years and here's what they've learned along the way, and that matters in the creation of the car. Like I think those tend to be really successful.
Yeah, and that's why, if they're memorable, like you'll remember it and think, oh, that was a good ad. Whereas, you see, because people are so desensitized to seeing like a Super Bowl ad that costs $50 million or whatever, and, it's just the same old thing. Whereas if you can do something that's kind of memorable and is something different or has some kind of story behind it, like that's something that kind of people will attach themselves to and find that it's something, that they want to share or enjoy or watch a second time. Like I remember somebody talking about watching show reels, and like they'll watch it and then wait a few days, and if they don't remember anything, they're not going to call that director back or DP back. So it's like, okay, how do you make things memorable? How do you make things different than what everyone else is doing? But like you said, also following the rules of what you're supposed to do, because you have to deal with the client of what they expect as well.
And I think that just comes down to following your gut, and the director, more importantly, the director following their gut, and you helping them embrace the choices that they find interesting. Like if there's one through line through our conversation here, it's that I owe everything that I've done well to a director that's done something well. Like good cinematography is me just executing the visual end of what a director's looking for. Like that's all it is. And like I said, I don't mean to detract from my own contribution, because it's obviously there, but it should always be rooted in the thing I read in their treatment or in the discussion I have with them when I come upon the project, because then we're going to be in unison, and that sort of harmony of our voices together is what makes a project work. And I could also extend that to the actors' performances, to the production designer, to the editor's vision for the cut, to the sound design, to the score. If all those things have the same feeling at the heart of what they're doing, the project can be really successful. If we're all creating really unique individual strokes that don't line up, the project's gonna be shit.
So what are your like goals for the future? Like, what do you want to accomplish?
I mean, there's a lot. I think there's, in the world of my DP career, like I definitely, I would love to do more narrative work. I've shot one movie that was an absolute gift. As I said, it was, Mark Mary and some other people with Hannah. It was awesome. We had the privilege of showing at Tribeca and going to theaters, and ultimately the movie's on Hulu now. And that was, to me, a really transformative experience, getting to work with great actors and a great script and a wonderful director, and just the whole team, an amazing production designer as well on that job. Shout out to Miranda Lorenz, like just really, really great team. And it was at the heart of it, I'm a narrative DP. And what I mean by that is that I care about story. So it's an obvious marriage when I get to work in the narrative space. But at the same time, so many people who want to shoot more narrative are saying they want to get away from shooting commercials, and that's not how I feel at all. I love commercials. I grew up around the ad space. My dad was a creative director at an agency, which I thought would be more helpful to me in my career, and has not been. But it's just something I've known about for a long time, and I enjoy the art of advertising, and I enjoy the workflow of short form projects and going on to something for a week and then on to something else and getting to exercise different parts of my palate and my brain. So I think for me, the career is about having a mix of the two. It's about shooting a movie, but then going back to commercials or music videos or whatever inspires me. And I think I've seen my taste evolve so much over the last 10 years of shooting that I don't anticipate my taste to stay the same as I go forward. So that's really exciting. And then the other half of it, which I think gets talked about not enough, is work-life balance. Like for me, I don't think cinematography is the most important thing. I think it's a wonderful job that I feel very, very blessed to have. I feel connected to and brings me a ton of joy. But for me, life is so much more than that. It's about experience and about love and connection and relationships and friends. And I think that creates better art. Like I think going out and living my life fully has allowed me to be a better artist. So part of what I preach, at least how I see for myself, is to be balanced and to spend time making myself happy in ways that are outside of cinematography, because that'll lead to better art. And that's no shade to people who, movies are their life and they want to really focus in on cinematography. I think that's wonderful, but for me, that's not how I see things. I just am a bit more balanced, So that's part of the goal, is to, like, as I evolve my career and get bigger and hopefully get bigger and better at my craft, I don't want to lose sight of just experiencing life, because I think that is what makes a good DP.
Yeah, like there's some commercial directors, like, early on in their career, like David Fincher or Ridley Scott, that would go on and do like feature films, but they'll always come back and do a commercial here and there, because it's kind of like they can experiment with, new technology or new techniques. So I think it's a good place to do stuff in terms of short form, whereas features, you're kind of on it for like months at a time, whereas like if you're shooting commercials, kind of shorter time frames.
More of a sense of normalcy. I mean, I'll say that as someone who has shot a movie, like you really have to dive into it head first. You can't be halfway in and work on a movie. It takes up months of your life in a really all-consuming way, which is a beautiful spiritual experience. But I think for someone who does, like me, that can be a bit unsustainable if that's all you do. So commercials give me a bit more balance in my life, where I'm able to work and then step away from work, which I think refreshes me and makes me a better artist.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like experiencing life outside of just work, like that's how you're able to bring in those like human interactions and maybe stories, or talking about stuff that isn't just work. Because then if you're always talking about the camera, you're going to be kind of boring person, whereas it's like, I want to talk about other stuff.
Or even just your art will suffer. Like, I don't know how you could shoot a movie about heartbreak if you don't go through heartbreak. I don't know how you could, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't experience those things that life has to offer you, I don't know how you could have perspective on it. So part of, I think, from where I stand, again, like to each their own, but from where I stand, it's your duty as an artist to experience the things you intend to make art about. And it doesn't mean it always has to be firsthand. It's like, yeah, I will never be on a spaceship and I could still go shoot a sci-fi. But the heart of what, what Star Wars is about is elemental human things that you should experience to be able to shoot them.
Yeah, because you hear about it all the time about writers, like go off and experience life before you write your first feature or whatever, your short story, because you can learn from those experiences. But like, yeah, I didn't think about it the same way, as you can do it as a DP. You can take those life experiences and put it into your work.
I mean, I think it's paramount, because I think ultimately the role of the cinematographer, you're not there to be a photographer. Like, I think that's something we haven't maybe talked enough about in this chat, is that like the role of a cinematographer is you're a purveyor of emotion. Your job is to be a visual translator for a feeling. And the feeling is the important part, not the lighting, not the composition. None of that shit matters if the feeling isn't there. Like, and that's, you hear someone like, like Roger Deakins talk about that a shot that's good isn't always pretty. It's just good. Like, it just, and what that means is it captures the feeling that you're trying to capture. So like, the role is about understanding emotion and being able to translate emotion. That's what being a cinematographer is. Like, photography is a means to an end. It's a secondhand part of what we do. as far as I see it, I think the most important thing we do is understand emotion.
So yeah, like talking about what you said is like providing that emotional context. Like I know Roger Deakins always says like the best seat in the house is like on a 50 mil, like right in front of like the singer. Like why would I change lenses? Why would I change this? Like that's what I want to see is just like that point of view.
Well, and that's what you bring to the table as a DP is your own perspective on it. And ideally, more specifically, your perspective as it marries to a director's perspective to be, that's because that's where I sort of see it. But like, for instance, a lot of people theorize or scientifically talk about the idea that the human eye sees like, I want to say like a 35 mil or something. And that's just not how I don't agree. Like for me, the human eye sees a 24. And that's just that's what I feel. I feel like perspective or peripheral vision is a bigger part of it than a 35 whatever capture. And so I don't care like what a scientific, accurate thing would say. Like for me, the thing that feels like my sense of the world is a 24 mil. And that tends to be the basis of how I'm shooting from a lens perspective. Like that's the baseline. And from there, I'm either going longer or wider,
Yeah, it's kind of like I can see like a giant fisheye, but I only focus in on like this. And I guess the rest of the information is just there, but it's not really, especially with filmmaking, you want the audience to look at certain, that's why they have like depth and focus and look here rather than like a big 3D like virtual reality thing that where they meant to look.
Same time, that's on a per artist basis and on a per project basis. Like you can make the argument just as well that someone like Derek Cianfrance like uses long lenses in such an intimate, connective way that doesn't feel like you're detached. Like I would like one of the best pieces of work I've seen in many years is I think it's called This Much I Know Is True or something. I am paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words of it's a mini series he did with Mark Ruffalo on HBO, and it was just unbelievable, that show. And a lot of what I think Jody Lee Lipes shot that, but a lot of people on that, or a lot of shots in that project are longer lenses, and longer than I would normally choose to use. But that's his perspective that he brings to things, and I would say it's unbelievably connective and naturalistic versus like, you could say the same adjectives around, Lubezki using a 14 mil. So it's about what creates that feeling of connectivity to the material and to the emotion. And you can do that anywhere from a 200 mil down to a 10 mil. It just depends on the perspective you're trying to create.
Yeah, and that's why it's so interesting to have those initial conversations of like, what are you going for? Like, what do you want? And not having like an ego in terms of, oh, I only shoot 24 to 70 or I only use this one lens. Like that's a pretty, yeah.
It's a bad way to work. It just doesn't make any sense. Like at least for me, like all decisions should be grounded in what's right for the project and the story and the moment. And anything else outside of that is superfluous.
Yeah, because I've seen like a lot of like wide angle lens kind of commercials. I guess I've picked on them up on it lately, but they've probably been doing it since like the hip hop era of the 90s when everything was like a fisheye next shot.
The unfortunate part of like the internet age of cinematography is that trends are too prevalent. Like you'll see some director use a 14 mil right here, and then all of a sudden every ad for the next 2 years has that reference. And it does drive me a bit nuts where I end up having to shoot the same things over and over again, not just even because of my work, but just like because of the trends in the ad world. Like a director coming in and saying, oh, I've like seen a bunch of ads that I really love that were shot with this perspective, so I'm going to do that. And if it happens to be right for the job, I'm psyched. But if it's like feels like an arbitrary choice, I'm like, oh man, I wish Instagram didn't exist.
Yeah, and like going along the lines of that too is like everything is kind of formulaic in terms of like it's a puzzle we're all going to solve, but there are certain things at 60 seconds. It's like 60 cuts or whatever, and they'll see a commercial like, I want to do that. Or like it could be the agency that's just like, I want one of those. And then you have to kind of recreate what they want. But you know that it's just like a copy of someone else's thing.
But at the same time, it's funny, like as much as I can hate on that, part of me also goes like, for young cinematographers, being a copycat is like, it's in a way kind of how you grow. Because like and the beauty of it is you can never, even if you studied something exactly, you'll never do it the same. That's what I love about this too, is that if I told, the 21-year-old cinematographer asked me how to shoot a shot and they said that I had done something similar, how did you do it? I could tell them the exact things I did, like the exact light, where it was, what lens, what camera, and give them the exact blueprint for how to do it, and their shot would still look different because there's implicit things in there that you can't take out. So I think as much as I don't like the trend and copycat style of work that happens now, I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because it allows people to learn things about themselves in the process of copying someone else's work. And we are at a point in history where you can't make anything truly original anymore. You just can't. Like you referenced The Creator, that's a quote unquote original sci-fi, as in it's not IP and it's not a remake or whatever, but that movie draws upon a bunch of sci-fis because of course it does, because Gareth Edwards grew up watching stuff. It's impossible to distance yourself from some form of flattering copycatism. It just doesn't exist. So I don't know. Part of me is conflicted about it, where I wish art was wholly original, and then part of me is who gives a shit? Just make stuff.
Yeah, because there are constraints of you have to follow the brief, but there are times when you can experiment and go outside the box and push it and figure out something different or new. And then it might be hard for a DP because you don't have control of the edit or the director in terms of advertising. The agency will just take it and cut it up how they want. So are there times when, in terms of getting control, I guess you can't really control the footage, but you can you control when you press record and stop?
If you want to be a control freak, I'd find another business, to be honest, because it's just you're one of so many people, and you're also not the most. If you want to be in control, maybe be a director, or a creative director at an ad agency, because it isn't up to me. I don't control when we press go. You know what I mean? I really don't at all. I have slight influence in bits and pieces. I can massage things here and there, and in a good working relationship with the director, maybe I can ask for something, but I'm not in control of it. If the director wants to press record before I'm lit, before we slap the slate and turn around, they're entitled to. And you have to make peace with that as a cinematographer and try to color within those lines, because it's the right way to work.
So there, it goes back to what we've been talking about the whole time, in terms of being able to accept, or you can't control everything, and you might get upset, oh, that's not how I want it to look, but just letting it fall off and meditate and breathe without getting,
Control what you can control, and then let the rest go. For instance, topical example that I'm sure so many DPs will reckon with is the weather. You can't control the weather, so just stop worrying about it in any way. Doesn't mean don't be prepared, but don't let it affect you. And I'm guilty of that as ever. On an ad recently, it was cloudy when it was supposed to be sunny, and I'm sitting there cursing at the clouds saying, get the fuck out of here. But and I had texted a buddy of mine, a DP named Jordan Buck, who I love, and said, hey, what do you do when you get clouds and you're supposed to have this look? And he said, he gave me the usual tips and tricks that I have in my bag as well, about using big lights if you have the time. But ultimately, his biggest answer that I agree with is let go. It's not going to look like it's sunny. Get over it. It's just not. And that's okay. Yeah, there are tricks. You can go long lens, and you can use big HMIs or big tungsten units, and you can massage things in it. But at the same time, the commercial I was on, we were shooting on a 12 mil. I'm not going to ever make a 12 millimeter on a cloudy day look like it's sunny. Just not. There's nothing I can do about that. So let go of it, put a smile on, and go to work.
Sweet. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Casey, for talking with us. It's been really great just hearing your story and your insight into director of photography, the role, working in commercials, features, all that stuff. But do you have any advice for maybe somebody who's coming up as a DP and they really want to get into directing, or not directing, but DPing for commercials and maybe just some general advice for them that we can.
Oh man, I mean, there's so many like things, but I've picked up on and could delineate. But I think a lot of them we've actually touched on in this chat. But I think one thing is to give yourself a little grace along the way. I think it can be really daunting to try to become a cinematographer. Like I remember when I first started, I was looking at the world of lighting and the Rodrigo Priettos of the world and going, how the fuck do these people learn what they learned? And the answer is over a lifetime. So be nice to yourself. Like you're not going to be like, yeah, there's one or two people out there who when they're 24 are like phenoms, but you're probably not them. So start learning. One thing I'd say tangibly to that end is learn lighting. And this is when people ask me how I learned lighting, this is how I did it. Like learn it on a case by case, shot by shot, project by project basis, because the world of cinematography is big and lighting in general can be really daunting if you think about it as a whole. But if you think about the shot you have to do that day, it gets a lot easier. Like, oh, I'm lighting an interior bedroom meant to feel like early morning. That's it. Like, don't think about all the bedrooms you could possibly have to light and all the different ways you could light them or how they lit a million things on Euphoria. Like, that's useless. Like, think about the thing you're working on. And then after you've learned that, you will have learned that. And remember the mistakes you made, remember the successes you had and why things worked, why they didn't work. And over 10 years of shooting projects, all of a sudden you'll look back and go, I know a lot about how to light things because I've made a million mistakes and I've done a million different scenarios. So that was a big thing for me. Like I remember the first time I ever lit a big night exterior, it just kept me up for weeks. Like I could not sleep. I was scared shitless about it because I also didn't have like the biggest tools in the world. And I was like, how am I going to light, 300 feet of forests without the stuff that they have on these big movies? And, I looked at references, I looked at how did, they shoot, oh my God. Like there was a bunch of like nighttime, like cowboy movies I looked at and it's like, how do they do moonlight? And I saw 6 different ways that people did moonlight. I went, okay, how can I do the best I can to kind of fake those ideas that I've seen? And in doing those, I found something true to myself because I couldn't emulate, what these big DPs did. I did my own version of it and it shoot for the stars, land on the clouds kind of mentality. So that's one thing for sure is like make the gains of knowledge that you have to make smaller and more attainable because it makes it a lot easier to go to work. I think, and then another thing is to just really focus on, like I said, some of the ethical things of it that go a little less unheard and unsaid is like, be a nice person, be persistent, but kind, try to align yourself with people who you like to work with because you'll probably make better work. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's hard. It's hard to think about like, how did you get here? Like to look back on the progress I've made thus far in my career and say, how did I do it? Because my story is my own, and I think most DPs will tell you that there is no one-to-one translation of how to become a cinematographer. Like you just need to kind of almost reverse engineer it. Say, here's where I want to go. What do I think might get me there? And then try and fail, see, oh, that step in that direction didn't work. Well, let me try this one. Let me try this, There's no right answer. And actually that's a beautiful thing because if it was 1970, the answer would have been welcome to 25 years of working your way up through camera department, which is not something that I would have ever signed up for.
Sweet. Yeah, because like the technology's there. It's just like the whole point of this like podcast is trying to figure out like that human interaction because you could either just go and create stuff for yourself or you could work for brands and get paid and make a career out of it. Like it's very hard to make money on YouTube or like be an influencer or whatever, like unless that's what you're into. But if you want to be a DP, there's not that many like there's like music videos, commercials, documentaries, features, like, but it takes like years and years of working to get there.
Yeah, and the first step, which was my first step, is just be a DP. Like, and it starts with calling yourself one, even when you might feel like an imposter. Like you're not a camera, you're not like I'm a first AC, but I want a DP. Like, no, just say I'm a DP. Like, be the thing that you want to be and speak it into existence. And then goal number one is shoot anything. Shoot anything that anyone will let you shoot, like at all. Like if it's a, terribly boring wedding video, then try to make it a little bit more cinematic than they thought they'd get, or elevate it slightly. If it's a corporate interview, try to find a way to finesse some B-roll in there that you could cut into a montage and fake a commercial out of. If it's shoot a spec, it's shoot a spec. If it's shoot a short, shoot a short. But the best way to be a DP right now is just to be one. And that's a very privileged stance to have, because people have to make money and pay bills. And that's a very easy thing to say and a lot harder to do. But if you find yourself with the financial stability to shoot stuff and make no money doing it, do it. Like it's not easy though. It takes a ton of dedication. And, like for me, it was 8 years of scraping by to finally start making any money doing this stuff. So, it's not easy, and you have to be kind to yourself along the way and be patient and like recognize and remember that like it is an old person's game. Like there's a reason everyone is winning Oscars. It's like 60 years old. Like it takes a long time to get really good at it. So be nice to yourself.